Howdy, folks. Happy Thursday. Whenever I go up to Toronto and let's just say it was Blue Jays, Yankees, and the Leafs playoff game, and the Union Station was packed to the point, and I didn't get out until like 10:30. So I got the 11:15 train and didn't get home till almost 2. So you're going to have to carry me, Russ.
I mean, how's this day different than any other day?
No, usually I carry you.
Oh.
Go ahead.
So let's talk about James Harden and the 76ers.
Oh, boy.
So this is an interesting one because when the Sixers acquired him, there was all this talk like, hey, he's that piece. We can go far. Nobody was talking about winning a championship because I think everybody knew they needed another player. But especially with, Ben Simmons being gone and, and even Maxey has done a good job for them, but he's young. So they get him. He's reasonably in shape, or he's as good a shape as he can be in now, but he's just not in shape anymore. Whatever it is, right? So, Joel Embiid goes out. He has that concussion orbital bone break in his face. Who knows when he's coming back?
How did he get that? How did he get that, by the way?
I don't know. I think an elbow to the eye is what I think.
Okay.
But anyhow, so you have Harden and you figure, okay, this is his chance to shine. He has one more year left on his deal. He's probably going to take the opt-in for the Sixers because at this point, I don't think anybody else would want to give him a max contract based off of this season. And, he gets like 20 points. And it's like, what happened to the 30-something point James Harden? But again, like just watching a little bit of it, he's definitely slower. He's definitely not as accurate. I can never figure this guy out. I swear I can't.
Ted, what happened to the 30-plus point James Harden is he ate him.
I think he left him in Brooklyn.
I mean, it's unbelievable though, right? I mean,
because the guy purposely got fat in Houston to get himself out to go to Brooklyn. And then magically, I think he went on the Atkins diet and lost most of it. But then he, turned out to be a pariah with that, which, an organization of pariahs, Kyrie Irving and James Harden. It's like, it's
the
like
Nets are never going to win.
Hitler and Mussolini at the Munich conference in 1938.
The curse of Dr. J will go on forever, as far as I'm concerned, with the Nets. But you make a good point. He did all these things. So then he goes to the Sixers, and this is like a chance for him to get his next big contract. And man, is he failing.
And let me just specify, I'm not comparing Kyrie Irving to Hitler. Okay, I just said.
Good, Mike. I'm glad you made that.
Yes, please do not start a protest against the Buzzcast. But anyway,
well, it's a perfect thing that it didn't work for anybody. I mean, look at Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons is going to be out forever. So
I don't think he's ever going to play a game for the Nets.
Well, he's having back surgery now. He might be out all of next year.
Yeah.
Yep.
Jeez.
But he is petitioning the league to get paid.
Oh God. Yeah. So is Trevor Bauer.
The NBA is kind of crazy. It is.
Yes. All right. Let's start the show. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Thursday, May 5th, 2022. Cinco de Mayo.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology, and I think Esmir has it right. He said Harden is the NBA's Phil Kessel. I think he's right.
I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com, and we are pleased to be joined by Ted Starkey, who's been on the show a few times, and we're more than glad to have him today to talk about some of the Game 2s of the Stanley Cup playoffs last night and the upcoming Game 2s tonight. Let's start with the game that I was at, the gift that keeps on giving, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Ted, at the beginning, I picked Tampa to win the series because I thought, and I understand the excitement and the fun and frivolity that was going on in Toronto after Game 1. They were dominating. They almost played a perfect game. It didn't matter that they took 4, 5, 6 penalties. Their penalty killing was unbelievable. They got 5-on-5 offense. They got a power play goal. They had a shorthanded goal. Everything went right, which means game 2, everything went wrong. And not everything, but I tweeted out when Victor Hedman scored a goal with 1.4 seconds left to go in the first period. After it was pretty much an even period, the Leafs had off a few chances, so did Tampa. I said that, especially in the playoffs, those goals are absolute killers. And whatever momentum they had in that game or hope, I think evaporated at that point.
Yeah, no, I think before the series, like you, I thought Tampa was a little bit more complete. I didn't think they were a great matchup for Toronto. I thought, Toronto could have picked or could have had a much better first round opponent.
Yes.
But obviously, like you said, in the first game, I thought they played really well. Yesterday, you saw more of what Tampa can do. They can defend, they can score, they have good goaltending, and they got all 3 last night. Whereas, they were all MIA the first round. And what makes it tough for Toronto too is, honestly, it probably would have been better if it had been the road team, because it's easier in the first 2 games. You just got to steal one, and Tampa did what they had to do. Toronto, obviously, they got the hype meter. The parade plans out for Yonge Street after game 1, and then Tampa showed why they've won the Stanley Cup twice in a row. They're a very complete team. They're still probably the team to beat in the East, and they kind of showed why. And obviously, with the series going back down to Florida, it's going to be interesting to see what the next 2 bring. Toronto probably has to get a split on its own, otherwise they're in a lot of trouble.
Now, Russ, the thing that I when we talked earlier, Tampa is an initiator of physicality. They have guys who are sandpaper guys, Maroon and Perry especially, but they have other guys as well. McDonough, Colton. They have 5 or 6 guys who are sandpaper guys. When you're that type of team and you're playing a team that is not that type of team, and they react and they respond, the team that responds is the one who gets called for the penalties. Wayne Simmons got called for 2 penalties yesterday. One, he tried to initiate something. The other one was a response to something cheap. They pulled out one guy from the scrum. He gets called 2 power play goals. They scored 3 power play goals yesterday. And that was the difference in the game. And the Leafs, I don't think, can play that reactionary game against Tampa. They did in game 1, and they didn't get burned. In game 2, it was a conflagration of Dresden proportions.
No, I think you make a good point there, because like having Wayne Simmons in a playoff game is almost to a point where you shouldn't do it. I can see doing it game 1 at home. You want to set the tone. But now that game 2 did go that way, why are you having him in game 3? Like, what does he add other than the occasional hit? But he does sometimes go too far on the penalties, especially since they're calling a lot more of them now than they used to. Like, that is something the coach has to think about. And this is where I'm going to get into, Mike. Mm-hmm. You told me, because you sat in on the press conference for John Cooper, that, hey, before this game, they were going to make some adjustments because clearly there were some things that the Leafs exploited. What were the adjustments Sheldon Keefe made? Or did he just go with the same game plan because it worked?
Yeah.
You have to ask yourself that question, because if it comes down, look, I still think the Leafs are way more talented, and I still think they can win in 7. But the question is starting to come into my mind, can Sheldon Keefe hang with John Cooper? I'm not sure.
Well, of course he went with the same game plan because they won 5-0.
Yeah, but you still have to know that other teams are going to do differently too.
Russ, I'll tell you this, and Ted, this was the thing. You win 5-0, you dominate pretty much from beginning to end. Clifford gets suspended, which shouldn't be that big of a deal because he's a 4th-line guy who plays 6 or 7 minutes. And what did the Leafs do? They inserted Michael Bunting, who was a top-line guy all year. But by doing that, you changed 3 of the 4 lines. You put Bunting with Matthews and Marner. You put Kasha on the 4th line to replace Clifford. You put Kerfoot on the 2nd line, and the only line that stayed the same was the 3rd line. That's a lot of changes in terms of the makeup of the lines going into a game 2 after you dominated in game 1. Why didn't you just put Bunting on the 4th line and leave things the way they were with the other lines? That was one minor criticism, but I look at the Leafs and the way that they're responding to Tampa. I think opposite of what Russ is saying, I think they're going to put Clifford back in the lineup in Game 3. I don't think they're going to put Spezza and go with a more skill lineup. I think they're going to go back to play physical guys.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see because, everyone down the stretch was like, oh, Tampa isn't as good as they used to be. And I kind of saw them as lying in the weeds. I remember the Penguins used to do this. The regular season kind of becomes a little bit, it's important, but not as important. The Islanders used to do this. And I kind of saw that you had an 82-game schedule. We're going to kind of coast in. And, obviously they weren't very good in Game 1. But, I think you kind of had to expect there's going to be a push because they're not the Lightning because, they're the Lightning and they need to come back with a strong effort. And they did. And, I expect back at home, there'll probably be a lot of push for offense. Teams like to kind of score more goals at home than on the road. So you might want to go a little bit more the skill route, but it's still, they're a very, very deep team. Toronto's a lot of high end skill that Tampa probably can't match, but overall, with the goaltending, the defense, Tampa's very, very tough.
Well, go ahead.
I was going to say, so looking at the minutes on the fourth line, Wayne Simmons played like 5:25. Colin Blackwell's a little over 6. And Blackwell, he can skate, but he needs guys with him to actually be able to produce. That's why I'm saying put Spezza in. Why in the world would you put Clifford back in? And why in the world would you put Simmons back in? Because, again, they're not scoring 5 goals every game.
It's called mutually assured destruction, Russ.
But you already said they can't play that game.
I know, but
have to play a different game.
That's my belief. But do I think that that's the belief of Sheldon Keefe? No, he believes he said after Game 1, even though he didn't agree with the hit that Clifford threw, he said after Game 1 that our fourth line had played best and down the stretch with Kyle Clifford in the lineup on the left wing. So he's going to put Kyle Clifford back in the lineup. I would be shocked.
This is where he's getting out coached.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, we will see game 3 switches to Tampa on Friday. Now let's talk about some of the other games from last night. Now let's start with the Carolina-Boston game because I watched a little bit of that in between, whistles. Somebody was watching it on the computer next to me. And the first thing, Ted, one of the weirdest plays, the Pasternak flyby on Ranta. It looked like he barely made contact, but Ranta goes down. He's bleeding. He leaves the ice. At first, it was called a major. Then they video reviewed it and called it a minor. I don't know exactly what happened, but Ranta, was thrown for a loop and was pulled from the game and didn't come back.
Yeah, it was strange too. Rod Brindamore called him out after the game for that, and I thought it was more of a, he kind of compared to the Tom Wilson hit a few weeks ago. When they called it afterwards, they're like, well, it's more of a hockey play. This was, Brindamore definitely wanted to pin it on Pasternak, and the Bruins have just looked out of sorts this series. I know they're desperate to try to get any kind of offense. I mean, Carolina's down to their third string goalie, and they still didn't get a whole lot of pressure on them until it was too late. And I've just, Boston, I kind of thought had to take advantage of Carolina's goalie issues, and they haven't been able to at all. Carolina's been pushing them. Boston's been on their heels, and they haven't created a whole lot of scoring chances. And I really can't see the series turning Boston's way. Maybe they get one game at home, but I can't see them winning 4 of this against.
Here's what I thought about the Pasternak, and you guys saw it too. I watched it a few times. What I think happened was that Pasternak got in close with him, was losing his balance. He inadvertently does hit Ranta in the jaw, no question about it. And then I think he hits his back skate. Ranta then hits the ground, and he gets bloodied and probably gets a concussion. And honestly, they should have left the 5 minutes, whether it's intentional or not, based on the destruction that happened to the goalie. I don't know how you don't do it otherwise, but whatever, they didn't. But also, I get it. Bruins fans didn't like some of the calls. I get it. No, this was not a perfectly called game. Another case in point was, I'm going to get into Kochetkov for a minute because one of the reasons, like when I've been bringing him up on this show, it's not simply because, hey, I think he's better than Ranta because I don't like Ranta. No, here's my thinking. I'm going to give you my whole thought process on Kochetkov. He was a star in the World Juniors. He was best goalie. He gets picked in the second round by Carolina, by Tony McDonald, who was there at the time. They used to be one of the best drafting teams. So I have a lot of faith in Tony McDonald, right? So he already had a great World Juniors. He already did that. Those were two reasons for me to always keep an eye on this kid. So then when I saw that he could get a chance, I wasn't going to question him because I know what he's capable of doing. I get everybody's going to say go with the experienced goalie, except Ronta doesn't have playoff experience. And what Kochetkov did in that game was when Marchand laid the dirty stick check on him outside of the crease, which should have been more than 2 minutes. What did Kochetkov do? He goes back at him with a stick and then punches him in the chest. That is something Ronta would never do. But Kochetkov, with the way that Carolina plays, he's the better guy to use against the Bruins, I think, because you have to play that way, that aggressive style. And right now, I wouldn't take him out.
No, Russ, you just hate Ronta. No,
I don't. He's a decent goalie.
I'm kidding. No, but okay. So we have Pasternak with the flyby on Ronta, and then we have Svechnikov freight training Hampus Lindholm in that game, and it sounds like Lindholm's going to miss some time. It was a very hard check.
Yeah, thank God for Omar catching him, because when he tried to get up, he probably would have hit his head, but Omar caught him.
Yeah, so I mean, Bruce, like Paul said, Bruce Cassidy said after the game he's not doing well. He was coming back off an injury and played the last couple games, so I don't know what the what hit the status for him for this rest of the series. But I want to ask you this, Ted, because there's a common theme here with the Leaf game against Tampa and now the Boston series. The referees are calling these games like a regular season. This is not playoff, like, putting the whistle away or it's got to be drawing blood or whatever. They're calling really ticky-tack calls, and I hate it. I think it's terrible.
Yeah, you haven't seen, a bunch of games have already had 5-on-3s, which you rarely see in playoff games. Maybe you'll see one in a series, but multiple, we're only 2 games in some of the series, and we've seen a bunch of them. The interesting thing with the refereeing, it'll be interesting if the league came down and said, we're going to call this like the regular season. And then, about games 4, 5, 6, 7, then the whistles go away.
We'll see. So far, that hasn't been the case.
Yeah, no, for the most part, it's been there's been a lot of power plays, and obviously that helps the teams with good special teams. Usually if you have a good special teams, you got to win a series early because those power plays go away in the second half. So it'll be interesting to see if they're consistent through the series, let alone a couple games.
The other thing that I thought Mike was going to hit on, but we chatted about earlier, was that hit by Svechnikov, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is now the free shot you're allowed to take because you're not running the guy into the boards. You're hitting him in the jaw, even though it's a headshot. And
right.
We saw it happen to Raquel, too. And players know this now, and they're taking that free shot at players when they can get it. And it does make me wonder, why isn't the league closing the gap on any contact to the head? Any.
Yeah. No, you can tell he had no idea where he was before he got hit. And you just could see him blow up when he got hit. And it was just, it was awkward. Obviously, he caught his leg. And as you were saying, he could have fallen back over because he was nearly out of it when he tried to get back up. And it was just –
so why is the free shot allowed?
It's the NHL. That's the best thing you could explain.
Okay.
For years they've kind of been so slow in catching up with what's actually happening. They've now gone at least to what they consider intentional headshots. Now, it was still a clear shot at him. It's within the rules, but it's also not something you really want to see in your game when one of your top defensemen are taken out like that.
Yeah. Now the Bruins really have to regroup because, Carolina is clearly the more talented team, but Carolina is out-Bruining the Bruins.
Right.
And Cassidy was legitimately pissed off on the bench yesterday. It's the most I've seen him mad at his guys, actually yelling at his guys. And, right now, the problem for the Bruins is their window is closing.
Right.
It's closing for this group. They do have some other players that are coming. But, there's going to be that in-between stage now where they had bad contracts with Charlie Coyle, which we talked about that. Hey, he's a little bit too big and slow for this league. But no, they went all in on Charlie Coyle. And so some of those other contracts now are going to start to hurt him. And Bergeron, whether he comes back, whether he goes to Montreal, we are going to start to see the Bruins changing.
Well, hence the reason why every Leaf fan should have been rooting for them to lose to the Bruins and play the Bruins in the first round. Now Tampa Bay won that last game, so it was a moot point. But Ted, you look at the Bruins. Krejci is gone, so they have no second line. I don't care if Eric Hall had a great year. He's not Krejci. Krejci was a linchpin on the power play, and he was a second line center that you could play Pasternak with and take the heat off of the first line. They're putting DeBrusk on the first line to move Pasternak down to the second line with Hall and Hall. I don't think that's working. That's not, in my mind, a great threat as a second line. I'm going to focus on Bergeron and Marchand, and if you shut them down, you probably win. And you don't have Tuukka Rask in goal anymore. I mean, I like Linus Ullmark. He was a good goalie in Buffalo. I'm surprised they didn't go with Swayman. Now I wonder whether they'll go to Swayman in Game 3.
I think they will.
Yeah, I think supposedly they're going to.
Yeah, so I mean, Boston is a flawed team. They were going into the playoffs as a flawed team, and now their flaws are showing.
It's weird because I talked to people who are around the Bruins, and it was kind of like this year, had there been a ninth team that really had pushed them for the playoffs, you wonder if they would have behaved differently because, I think they all knew this rebuild was coming, but you're not going to say, I'm just going to punt this playoff spot away.
Right.
If the Islanders had been better, if the Red Wings had held it together longer, perhaps they would have decided to sell instead of, adding a couple pieces at the deadline because everyone knows this is coming. The team is going to be markedly different next year.
To be honest, I picked them out of the playoffs. I did, right. So I was wrong on that, but they're not going far in these playoffs.
No, I mean they're basically a one-line team. If the Pasternak line is not productive, or if they give up 5 goals a game, they're not going to win. And
listen, Jake in the chat room says, hey, Carolina's a pretty damn good team. We know that. We're saying that. I think we all picked them as a reason.
Yep. No, and I think go ahead.
No, the only thing that could hold Carolina back would be their goaltending. If Freddie Anderson goes in there, I can guarantee you I'm not picking them the next series. But I like the Russian goalie. So if Kochekov's in there, I'll keep picking them. That's just me. That's my preference.
Get ready to pick against him, Russ, because Anderson's going in.
I will. Next series, I will.
And I was going to say they're playing a little bit. Pittsburgh used to do this defense by offense. They just keep pushing back. They don't necessarily have the good goaltending per se, but because they keep the puck in the offensive zone so much, they really aren't giving the Bruins much chance to exploit what should be a weakness for them.
Now in Game 2, it was.
Can I mention one other thing?
Yep.
Because I was watching ESPN, and I don't know who made the remark, but there was a remark made that, look at that move by Ryan McDonagh. He's a defensive defenseman. I didn't know he had that in him. Ryan McDonagh's had 3 seasons over 40 points. It's just, I want ESPN to do better on these broadcasts. I think some people are doing a really good job. I think Emily Kaplan's doing a really good job. But I do think their overall NHL knowledge isn't great.
Yeah, you can start.
Are you guys finding that?
You can start with the in-between periods. I'm sorry. I don't find anything that Chris Chelios or Mark Messier. They're Hall of Fame players. They're freaking fantastic players. They offer me nothing in terms of insight. You would think that with all their vast playoff and Stanley Cup experience that they would offer insights, and it's boilerplate bullshit, Ted. It's really boring.
No, I felt like ESPN's coverage this year is we got the property now. We're going to put it on the shelf and let it run itself. I mean, I don't think it's been overly spectacular. Like you were saying, the intermission shows are just you want to flip to another game because you just can't. Listen to Mark Messier and Chris Chelios chat for.
Randy says it was Ray Ferraro. If it was, hey, he generally does a great job. Then that's just a bad statement by him.
I think
overall, I don't like the overall NHL knowledge if Ferraro's not on the broadcast.
I think Shaq and Kenny Smith and Charles Barkley would give better hockey analysis than.
No, look, I mean, if Ferraro's on the broadcast, it's a good.
Ferraro's great.
Yeah. And I like John Buccigross doing studio, but he's awful play-by-play. I mean, he did the Toronto games, and you're just like, I get he carried the flag for hockey for years at ESPN. but he's got to be in the studio. He can't.
So Randy just said it wasn't Ferraro, which makes sense because Ray Ferraro knows better.
He's a really nice guy, Ted. And yesterday when I made my comment after Nylander revealed that he had food poisoning, and I made my sushi comment, him and AJ Malesko and Julie Stewart-Banks and Kaylee Chelios all laughed, and we were having a good time on it. I think he'd be I put him in the studio and have him talk with, get a couple different players who actually have personalities and put them in there, and it would be great. But it really, honestly, it's.
I think the other funny thing was, sorry, Ted.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, I think he just has trouble carrying the play. I think that's his biggest flaw.
Yeah, in between periods. Oh no, it was before the game yesterday. I'm listening to Messier, and I'm intently listening to see if he will talk about even one player. He never mentioned a player's name, not one player. And Chelios was stuck on Brad Marchand. Like, it was just like, can you talk about some of these players instead of just boilerplate hockey stuff?
And Russ, what did they, because I watched the entire Pittsburgh Rangers game on ESPN, and what did they go back to over and over during the broadcast? They caught Messier reacting like a fan at the desk, and I'm like, why would you? That's the worst thing that you could do. It's like, you want these guys to be impartial arbiters, not rooting because he was a Ranger.
Right.
I don't even know if he was rooting.
No, we don't know. We don't know what he was doing. But the point is, and it's terrible for me to think this, and I think you guys are thinking the same thing. We're wondering, like, how much work do Chelios and Messier put into this before they go on air?
I don't think they show up and, hey, we'll talk for a few minutes, and that's how it seems to me.
Ted made the point, Russ. How much work did ESPN do? I mean, it's like, they
hired the camera angles, and some of the other things ESPN is doing are good.
Yeah, they hired a bunch of people, and some of them I'm friendly with, and I like and respect. Some of them, I even if I'm friendly with them, I'm going to criticize them because if they're not doing a good job. It's like, I mean, so okay, let's get back to the games here because we could go all day on that. So Minnesota rebounds after a bad game one where St. Louis seized the game on power play chances. It was a complete opposite of that in game two. They scored the first 4 goals. Kaprizov with the hat trick. They win 6-2. Ted, I mean, like, I liked Minnesota, but the one thing that scared me, and I tried to ignore regular season records, was their record. I think they were 0-9-1 in their last 10 against St. Louis. There was not much doubt here of the outcome, and if they can ride this, then they have a chance to win the series.
I mean, this is probably the NHL circle of death. Either one of these teams could win the Stanley Cup, and it's obvious. Obviously, with Marc-Andre Fleury, the Wild are really trying to up their goaltending game and kind of give themselves a balance. But yeah, it's going to be. I can't see this not being a 7-game series, just because I think these two teams are very, very capable, and they may be the only teams capable of knocking out Colorado in the Western bracket. So,
I think you're right.
I think Calgary can.
Calgary probably could too. I could still see it not being a 7-game series. I have to see now how St. Louis reacts, because the criticism I gave Minnesota last game was you didn't connect on your power play, which you needed to, and the game sort of slipped away. It wasn't, Fleury's fault. Well, this time they score on their first shot, so that kind of like puts a dent in the Ville Husso armor a little bit, and then they do connect on 2 power plays, and then your best player gets a hat trick. Now we have to see what St. Louis, because again, my contention is when Craig Berube knows who his goalie is, doesn't have to worry about that. He does a great job. I think Craig Berube now is going to be starting to think about if he has to use Jordan Binnington, especially if Minnesota goes up again next game. That's going to be the thought where the Wild actually said, hey, we knew that Fleury was not responsible for that first game loss. We never had any intention of taking him out. So they don't have that same worry right now.
Well, Ted, I don't know whether Berube can go to Binnington after one loss. If they lose again like they lost if they lose like they did in game 2 and game 3, then he might say okay, because once he goes to Binnington, I don't think he can go back to Husso unless there's injury.
Agreed. And I think they're in the same boat as Toronto and Tampa. I think if St. Louis loses game 3, they've got to win game 4. I mean, you got to get, Minnesota's got to get the split on the road, get it back to a best of 3 with home ice. But, I think he'll probably stay for at least one more game and see. But if they need game 4, he may pull the plug.
Yeah, I don't know what series home ice means less than Toronto Tampa.
Right.
Tampa can win in Toronto, and I think Toronto, if they have an offensive spurt, can win in Tampa. So, but with other series, I think it's meaningful. Now,
listen, Stumpy was out in the square. He guaranteed a series win.
Who?
Stumpy.
Steve Thomas?
Yeah.
Oh, I know
video of him guaranteeing the win.
Oh, well, that really worked. Didn't he used to work for Tampa Bay, by the way? So it's like,
Him
and he was firing up the crowd in Maple Leaf Square, Mike.
Yeah, no, he gave away the jersey to one of the military people. That's but I always like Steve Thomas. Okay, the other game from last night, again, a team bouncing back from a poor game 1 effort with a better effort. And Ted, I saw all I needed to see in about a 3-minute span. I think it was in the second period. I had checked in and out on this LA Edmonton game, and it was 1-0. And Darnell Nurse scores a goal. I think it was from along the boards, far out. It picked top corner on Quick. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, okay, this is not Jonathan Quick 2012 or 2014. They need that Jonathan Quick to be like he was in game 1, and that was not it. And as soon as I saw that, I'm like, they're going to lose. So it's 1-1 now going back to LA. What are your thoughts on this series?
I mean, I think, I agree with you. I think, obviously, LA did a lot to get in the playoffs. You have to wonder how much you're going to have left in the tank, too, because, obviously they overachieved to get in this year. And sometimes when you expend all that energy down the stretch just to get in, eventually, although, playing Edmonton, Edmonton isn't necessarily a team that's going to shut you down. You just got to make the saves because obviously you're playing McDavid and you're seeing a lot of good offensive opportunities. You got to make some of them. Otherwise, it's probably going to be, a more looser series than some of the Eastern ones. I think they'll both get teams all have nights on, nights off. I do think Edmonton will survive, but it would not shock me if LA knocked them out.
I didn't watch any of this game, but I'm shocked that Smith came up with a good game. I don't know how hard the shots were on him and anything, but I'm surprised he was able to reel it in from the game before. What this does tell us, though, I think, and this is something that we probably would have gotten a little pushback from Eck on, is we knew that goaltending was going to be good with Quick for, some of the series because he looked good at parts this year. But I kind of wonder now, short rest, a day off in between, the same grind. Can he keep that up? That's right. A big question mark now.
Yeah. So, I mean,
there's no more controlled rest like the regular season.
No, it's every other day. All these right. series, there's no 2 days in between. It's every other day. So it's especially after a long regular season with a lot of compacted games because of the delay in the middle of the year. It's really the team that is rested and more healthy has a distinct advantage. Now tonight, the games that started on Tuesday, game 1s on Tuesday are now going to game 2. And the first one we'll talk about is the Rangers in Pittsburgh. And we talked about, that game, the triple overtime loss. Ted, I thought that if there's any team that benefited from a triple overtime loss, it's the New York Rangers, because now Louis Domingue is the starting goaltender. Casey DeSmith, according to Frank Cervalli, it says, seems unlikely Casey DeSmith with a groin injury will be available again. So he may be out for the series. And they're saying Tristan Jarry with a foot fracture is out of a walking boot, rehabbing, and possibly could return later in round 1. Okay, there's a bridge in Brooklyn that I own. I'm ready to sell it. It's very possible. I don't underestimate any team with Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin, but with Louis Domingue, if Louis Domingue is Louis Domingue, the Rangers are going to come back and win the series.
Yeah, and I thought, obviously the narrative from coming in overtime, double overtime, was, it's a disadvantage. I disagree. I actually think it was an advantage for him to come in when the skaters are not at 100%. Everyone's tired.
Yeah, because I think you're right on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why, they're making such a big deal about it. I think, you're taking that. This is why you play fourth liners in deep overtimes, because these guys have been sitting on the bench, are well rested. other guys have been skating for 90 minutes, and they're not quite as sharp as they usually are. But I mean, I thought coming into the series, I didn't think the Penguins going to put a whole lot. I think they're a horrible match for the Rangers. I think the Rangers are a much more complete team than the Penguins are, especially defensively, and obviously with goal. I thought they kind of prolonged the series by winning game one, but I expect the Rangers to come back to win tonight. I think they probably win in 5 or 6 because I just think they're a more complete team. I mean, obviously Crosby and Malkin were very good in game one, but you can only carry them so far, and you can't play with AHL goaltending this time of year.
I mean, Russ, Raquel likely out for game 2 with appears to be a concussion. The only question for the Rangers was Ryan Lindgren, who was in and out of that game. If he's out, then probably Justin Braun steps in.
Yeah, that's what we're all expecting, Braun to come in. And
will Gallant go away from Ryan Reeves and the physical guys on the fourth line?
He should.
Will he?
No, probably not.
There we go.
Should he not play the fourth line with 2 minutes to go in the third period? Yeah, he should have not played the fourth line in that game, but he did. This is Gerard Gallant. Like, he has some blind spots, but look, he's doing a good job, and some guys are developing the kid line. Like, if I'm the coach, and of course I'm not, in this game, because everybody did play 100,000 minutes in that last game, I'm playing the kid line a lot for the Rangers, hoping because they're young that their legs are going to carry them through, and they already had trouble with them in the first game. To me, that would be a sound strategy.
They were pretty effective. Ted, I mean, that grouping of Lafreniere, Kakko, and Cheadle, or Hedel, I thought were excellent. I mean, I think the only concern that Gallant has is maybe defensively with those guys, but they seem to be working at both ends of the ice.
Yeah, in long range, if you look at the Rangers, they're probably a year ahead of schedule. This is them next year. I mean, they're basically playing with house money this year. Obviously, with Igor being so good, and obviously Chris Kreider coming out of nowhere to have a great season, but they are a year ahead of probably where they should be. But as I said, I think the Penguins are a very good matchup for them. I think they match up very well, and I would expect them to advance, especially.
Yeah, I still expect them to too. And look, the Penguins are very good at circling the wagons. But look, I watched Louis Domingue get picked apart by the Flyers a week and a half ago. Right. He's a decent goalie. He's better than David Rittich. I'm not going to go much further than that. I know, but he can make some saves.
And if you take any team's number 3 goalie, you're not probably going to win a playoff series. I mean, you could be the best team in the league. If you put in your AHL goaltender, you're going to have a tough time.
Right.
Pittsburgh stole a game, and I'm not going to get into the refs again on that call, but Pittsburgh stole a game, and that's fine. But I think Mike was right where, a lot of times you say, hey, they won the battle, but they're probably going to lose the war now because the war of attrition's getting to them.
Yeah, and that was such a strange game too, because the Rangers came out, they were dominant the first part of the game, and then once Pittsburgh got on the board, it just really seemed to just steamroll the other way, and that was just a very strange game. But I would expect domination.
Panarin needs to be much better. Panarin was very hesitant shooting for whatever reason. Listen, people want to say maybe it's because of the injury or whatever. Even if it is, he's got to overcome that.
Well, I heard some criticism of Gallant where in the second period when they were up 2-0, they sort of sat back and sort of a 1-4 checker, 4 defender.
It did do that a bit.
And that's playing into the Penguins' hands. That allows the Penguins.
I think they learned their lesson because I think that's what Crosby and Gensel figured out, that they had that little extra room and they were making those cross passes.
Right. And
Crosby knows, man, you can't. He's a coach on the ice, so you can't sit back and not expect somebody like Crosby or even Malkin to not pick you apart. So you're right.
Now, game 2, after the big, what I consider the biggest upset of the game 1s, which was the Capitals beating Florida in Florida. Ted, the Capitals well. I mean, going into the series, I mean, from what I've heard, Ovechkin is dinged. I know he sat out the last few games after he ran into the boards against the Leafs. I watched some of that game 1, and I didn't see him taking any one-timers. He was going more to the net, so that would lead me to believe that his shoulder is dinged. Tom Wilson played very few shifts early on. I don't know. I didn't see what his final ice time was, but he didn't play, and he scored a goal, but he didn't play as much. But yet they still beat the Panthers, and that specter of we haven't won a playoff series since 1996. That's worse than what's going on with Toronto right now. So what are your thoughts on this series?
It's interesting because I kind of see the Panthers as the Capitals from about 10 years ago. They're a very offensive team. I think one of the quiet storylines is Sergei Bobrovsky has not been very good against Washington in the playoffs. He lost. This was his 5th straight loss to Washington. Remember, he was in Columbus during Washington's 2018 Stanley Cup.
Yeah. You're right.
But the Florida actually finished with allowing more goals than Washington did. So talking about matchups, I think this is a pretty good matchup for Washington. My biggest question for the Capitals going in was how the goaltending was going to hold up. And after the first, 23 minutes when Vanacek left in 2 goals, he probably should have stopped. I was like, well, maybe they'll have a nice game, but come up a little bit short. But, they pressed on the Panthers. And, I thought the Panthers gave them a heck of a lot of room. Often the Kuznetsov goal, you don't often see a breakaway in the 3rd period of a tight playoff game. And then you saw another
one. Let's ask you about that, because honestly, that what they're calling a pick play, Ovechkin held them down. Oh, yeah. And it probably should have been a penalty, but it's Ovechkin, so it doesn't get called. It happened at a great time for the Capitals, but did you feel like that should have been a penalized call?
Yeah, and they let a lot go in the 3rd period. It was a more prototypical playoff game. You obviously saw, Washington had a 5-on-3 in the 1st period, but you didn't see much at all called, and there probably could have been a bunch of penalties both ways. But yeah,
they played a heavy game, like you said, and their veterans were able to do that and stick with that. I saw that Brett Leeson was called up, so I'm going to guess that Wilson's probably not playing.
Yeah, Tom Giolitti just tweeted out that Wilson is out and Leeson is playing his first.
But here's my problem with this one. This is strict Peter Laviolette. I'm taking out a big guy. I'm putting in another big guy. I would put in Connor McMichael, even if I'm putting him on the wing. He's a lot more talented. But Ted, this is just like, all right, I'm just going to have Leeson play the part of Tom Wilson because he's big. I mean, look, he's an okay player, but like, I don't get it.
He was drafted as a poor man's Tom Wilson. So why not fill in for Tom Wilson?
I think a lot of it was, Florida ccame out with a lot of hits in that game. I think they were trying to really take it physically to Washington, which I'm not sure that was the best idea. I didn't think they're particularly effective. And I think you kind of want to go with what brought you. But I thought Washington was very effective at unleashing the trap on Florida. I thought they really limited the chances after the 2 goals of what Florida put on Vanacek.
Are they really going to be able to hold Florida back? There's a lot of firepower there.
It's going to be interesting because Washington's very adaptive, and I'm curious to see how Florida is. Obviously, Washington can play a very offensive type of game, but they were the league's best road team for a reason. They could simplify, and that's exactly what they did in Game 1. Now, the home games for Washington might be a bigger issue because they're the worst team in the playoffs at home. So, obviously you might see, even if Washington comes out and wins tonight, you may see a role reversal on Saturday and Monday. You may see Florida come in and roll and put in a lot of goals. But I expect this to be a tight series. I have picked the Panthers in 6, but I have questions about both teams' goaltending. I think if Washington can at least match what Bobrovsky and I presume Spencer Knight will probably make an appearance this series can do, I think they have a very good shot. If the Florida's goaltending is better than Washington's, then Florida's going to advance.
Now, I don't know, not on purpose, but I don't know whether I'm going to watch 1 minute of Colorado Nashville because there's just no drama there.
If I watch 1 minute, they could be up 3-0.
Right. If I see Nashville up 2-0, then I may check in to see if like somebody has like gassed the Avalanche bench and they're all asleep. but I mean, Ted, it was like 5-0. 12 minutes into the first period, and I said that they're changing David Rich's nickname from Big Save Dave to Make a Save Dave. That's how bad he was.
I made a tweet. There was one point it was 5-0, and Nashville had 6 shots on goal. So like, what does that tell you? But yeah,
right. A 117 or 125 save percentage. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, it's just. Colorado, obviously they're another team with high expectations going to play. If you're not, Nashville's not stealing one in Denver, and maybe they win a game in the series, but I just can't see it. I think Colorado probably is gearing up for the next round. It's kind of they kind of got the gimme matchup of the first round. They avoided Dallas, who had to fight to get in, and Jake Ottinger has a little bit better goaltending if Saros isn't in. But
Well, the thinking is Connor Ingram's going to get the start, and look, he's had a good year. There was a time when Connor Ingram was a very highly touted goalie, and then he got lost a little bit. But Kevin Allen did bring up at the beginning of the year that, they thought highly of him, like all of a sudden he had started to click, which happens at a certain goaltending age. Look, honestly, I would use Connor Ingram. You can't be any worse than David Rittich. It's only a positive.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, David Rittich walked down the hallway and swung at the wall with his stick and missed. So, okay, so the other game is
nobody missed when they shot on him, though.
There you go. The other game is Calgary and Dallas. 1-0 Flames after a 1-0 victory. So Markstrom with the shutout. I saw the goal and then turned away from this game to watch the overtime between Rangers and Pittsburgh and turned it back, and it was 1-0. It was sort of like a low event game, Ted. It got interesting in the third simply because it was a 1-goal game. But I think Calgary's plan is just to suffocate their opponents to death, and they can do it.
Yeah, and Dallas down the stretch they're very hit or miss. They got some fortunate breaks down, but yeah, it would take a lot for Dallas to. I think they're happy to be in the playoffs. Obviously they were able to take out Vegas, and I think it's very difficult for me to see them winning more than a game against Calgary. Maybe one of the two in Dallas, but it's going to be very uphill for them.
Now, the interesting thing, I just saw this online. Darren Drager tweeted it out, and I've heard what apparently, okay, Edmonton, because of their border restrictions regarding testing, Edmonton is flying to Vancouver, busing over the over the border, and then flying from Seattle to LA, because if you drive over the border, all you need to do is have proof of vaccination and you don't have to be tested. But if you're flying directly from Edmonton to LA, then you do have to be tested. And if there are players that are asymptomatic that are positive, they'd be quarantined and they'd lose their services. I would assume that Calgary is probably doing the same thing, maybe driving to, Minnesota and then flying to Dallas, and Toronto probably will take a bus to Buffalo and fly to Tampa. That's sort of the end around that these teams have to do, even as, the concerns of COVID are waning.
It doesn't even make sense. It's like Canada knows these hockey teams are coming. Why?
It's the U.S. It's the U.S.
To get in the U.S.
To get in the U.S. Flying internationally from Canada to the U.S.
From Canada to the U.S. I misheard that. Okay.
U.S. Border restriction, or U.S. When they go through customs, apparently they have to do rapid tests as well. So that's the reason why.
And I've seen some of the Major League Baseball teams who've gone through Buffalo when they're playing up in Toronto because they don't want to do the same thing.
Yeah, the Yankees did. So and I was also surprised because there was talk about like a number of players for the Yankees that weren't vaccinated, and nobody was missing. Aaron Judge was there and everybody else was there. So that they must have either gotten vaccinated or they faked a vaccination card or something. But couple other things before we end the show. Russ, the announcement, it's apparently going to happen later today that the 2023 World Juniors will be going to Moncton and Halifax. Now, was that one that was supposed to go to Russia, or was that the
World Cup? Yeah.
So, I mean, that's not Halifax. I mean, that's not I'd love to go. I don't know about the Halifax in December.
I don't know about Halifax, but we'll see.
Halifax in December, I'm sure, is a little cold, Ted. But
well, now you get Edmonton in August, so you're going to have two of them within a couple months.
Right.
Yeah, there you go.
I do have some news too, Mike.
Yeah. I was going to bring up the North American skaters for the.
Well, save that for a minute. That'll be some fun.
Okay.
So Sam Morin, though, just announced his retirement from the Flyers. Chuck Fletcher sort of hedged on. He pretty much said Sam's not coming back. During his press conference a couple days ago when I was there. Listen, Sam's a good kid. He had too many injuries. He was behind the eight ball even when he got drafted because he just wasn't a great defenseman and had to really work at the job. But he finally got to the point where it did look like he could stick in some sort of job capacity, and then he had too many injuries. But the Flyers look like they might be keeping him in some capacity, which is great. My favorite Sam Morin story is during rookie camp. Well, there's two things. The first year of the Hextall regime, they started to do testing for the players, and they were doing it out in the open at Voorhees. So I walked in. I'm usually there about a half hour early for the rookie camp. I'm the only moron that does that because I get excited for it. And I see them testing, and I see them doing everything. And I asked like the guy who's notating. I said, "Hey, because I saw Sam Moran like racked the thing that you jump up and you hit with the metal. You hit it, and it turns around. He hit the top of it. That's how high he jumped. And the guy goes, "I'm not telling you." And I'm like, "That's okay." And I took a picture of it, and I still have a picture of it. The next day, all the equipment was in the back. They didn't test. They never tested again out front because somebody nosy like me was there. But the other thing about Sam is, he was like 6'7", right? 6'6", 6'7", right in that range. When he was using his stick in his rookie year, it was too short. And both Tim Panaccio and I were looking at him and we were like, "Sam, you could petition the league and get a longer stick." And he's like, "I can?" And we're like, "Yeah, get yourself a longer stick. You need it." So we tried to help him out. He's a great guy. And it would be nice. He would be a good addition to the Flyers because I think some of the younger players could still relate to him.
Couple news and notes here. I just noticed this and it just infuriates me, but it doesn't shock me coming from Gary Bettman. Bettman spoke to the media yesterday and said that the league has no interest in expanding its playoff format to include more teams, which just tells me that as soon as Gary Bettman is gone as commissioner, that probably will happen. He apparently is the impediment to that, which I don't understand. We all remember 16 teams in a 21-team league. That's an 80%, entry into the playoffs. Now it's
It used to be the joke. It was a joke.
Yeah, that was a joke, but 50% is a joke too. It really is. So, I mean, okay, fine. He says if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
I think Ted illustrated it well when he said, just getting another team into the playoffs this year, who is it going to be?
Yeah,
well, that was this year, but there have been other years where
maybe other years there were more worthy teams. Yeah. Sure.
I mean, maybe if you have a clause, if you're within 5 points, you get a series. But I mean, to have the Islanders and Columbus in this year would have been terrible.
But you also have to factor in, Ted, that these races were over basically at New Year's, and those teams those teams dumped players. I mean, teams like Detroit may not have dumped Nemestikov or Leddy if they were in the race. There was a 20-point gulf because a lot of those teams just traded off their expiring contracts, and they maybe would not have done that had there been a chance to finish in 9th or 10th and get into a play-in round. The other thing,
did you really expect him to make a change though?
Not with that, but
it's interesting to see in the American League how they're handling it. It's the playoff format just all over the place. You're seeing they had 24 teams get in.
You had an imbalanced schedule. You had teams playing you had 7 teams playing 72 games and 10 teams playing 70. I'm like, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah, and it's like you already have one round of the playoff is over for some teams. Some teams haven't begun the first round. It's massive confusion. But yeah, I think the league eventually they'll probably see the money that they can generate. But I don't think there's really a fair format you can come up with right now, because to give a team a week off isn't really much of an advantage because you get rusty and you get a team that coming back. And I think, if you don't expand it, eventually I'm sure the NHL will try to go to 34 teams.
Yeah.
And I think at that point they'll definitely bring it back. But
here's my hill to die on, Ted, is to bring back the 1-8 conference format, because you still can have divisional matchups in a 1-8 conference format, but the way things were structured this year with Minnesota St. Louis in the West and Toronto Tampa in the East, those teams should have had a better chance of advancing in the playoffs rather than face another 110-point team.
And the stupid thing for me is look at Carolina. Carolina is actually playing a better team because of the crossover.
Right.
Then they should have, ideally they should have gotten the second team in, which is Pittsburgh. But they're getting Boston, who finished with a much better, a couple more points. That makes no sense to me. I mean, kill the crossover. Just it's idiotic. And I mean, you look at if the Tampa Bay would have gone over to the Metro, that definitely changes complexion of that whole division. And so I just say I think the 1-8 format Hell, bring this 116 back. That's a hell of a lot more entertaining than what we have now.
Jeez, best of 3, 116. There you go. Russ, we'll save the North American
Yeah,
skaters.
say that. Tell people though, either go to thefaceoff.net or follow my Twitter feed. I just retweeted a picture of Phoenix's new digs in Tempe. Boy, does that look small! And of course, what's being sold is, well, it's going to be an intimate experience. And how much are tickets going to cost for this bad team?
Have we had the final vote in Tempe yet?
No. The other ASU is
no. This is you're talking about ASU, but I'm saying, have we had the vote?
No.
I mean, I think the cheap seats are over $115. So I mean, how many people are going to pay to see that if it's not, a team like Vegas or Pittsburgh, or the Rangers coming in where it's all visitors.
But it's small. Not only are you close to the ice, look at the distance between the seating and the wall.
It's probably going to be. It'll probably be like when the Chargers moved into the soccer stadium for a couple of years. It was only 28,000. Every seat's going to be a good seat, but you have to pay a hell of a lot to get in.
It's just, I don't even. I'm still dumbfounded by it.
Just move the team, please. Yeah. All right, we'll end it there. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Ted Starkey, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just